the US government deficit doesn't cause the trade deficit, and a too low savings rate in the United States doesn't cause its trade deficit either. Households can spend money, consume, and that consumption is demand for the production of business. Or households can save part of their income, and this part that they save, or that the society as a whole saves, the savings rate, are supposedly the funds available for businesses to invest. But if the government instead is borrowing that money and the businesses want to invest, they have to look elsewhere, maybe overseas, for foreign savings to get the funds they need to invest. So because the US government deficit is soaking up these savings, US savings, leaving none for businesses, or even if the government wasn't there, because the savings rate is just very low in the US, meaning there's not enough maybe for the investment needs of businesses. Businesses have to borrow from overseas, and this creates the deficit. Because of course, if you're borrowing other countries' money, you can only use it to buy other countries' goods. So that means you're importing the investment goods, the capital equipment, to make your investments from overseas. This is completely wrong. It shows a complete misunderstanding of how the economy functions. All the money that the government either borrows when it deficit spends or takes in as taxes, it gives back out. It spends itself. It doesn't matter if it's for what's called investment, so infrastructure, for example, public infrastructure, or just consumptive spending. The state may make transfer payments directly back to the household sector. It's also a customer for businesses directly buying business products. It has its own employees who are just households in the end, and who themselves save part of their income and spend part of it. So this here is apparently the thing that's missing, the savings that businesses don't have to invest. But let's look what happens when the government reduces its deficit spending, for example. It stops borrowing, but that means the exact amount it stops borrowing, it stops giving out. It stops spending on businesses directly. It stops transferring to households or paying its employees, however it made the savings, which means households have less income. And what do they do when they have less income? They will spend less on luxuries, non-essentials. If they were already only spending on essentials, if the economic situation had already been bad, maybe they reduce their savings instead. So either way, probably both, the demand from consumers for business products drops, and maybe even the household savings rate drops. But let's say it increases. Because of the sudden drop in income, households choose to save even more out of their income than before. Not only the income they've lost because of the reduced government expenditure is less spent, but even the money they still have, they move more of it to savings because they're a bit worried about their economic situation. But you've got to think, the business sector is many businesses, and businesses demand things from each other. And because the government and consumers have stopped spending money on business products, those businesses stop making orders for the production of other businesses. And the business sector as a whole are the ones that employ the households. So income that was previously going to the households in the form of wages disappears, which reduces even further consumer spending. And we forgot about taxes. There's taxes, but with all these incomes being lowered, with all these people losing their jobs, with all these businesses making less profits, the businesses pay a lot of taxes as well. With their fewer profits, tax revenue's gone, lower wages, tax revenue's gone. Tax revenue's gone if the government's not going to deficit spend, has to reduce its spending even more. At the end of all this, even if we're saying the savings, the absolute amount of savings is the same as before, at least the same, and now it's not being taken by the government, the businesses aren't going to invest. Businesses invest because they think they're going to make a profit. Each business has a certain capacity, its current potential for production, and because that's very highly exhausted, very highly used, they realize by expanding it, they could make even more profits. They could expand their output, their production, sell it, and have higher absolute profits than before. Businesses don't invest when their current output is dropping because the current demand for their output is dropping. And so their profits are dropping. Every single dollar less that's being received by businesses, every single dollar less being spent by the state or by households is $1 less in profits that the business sector has. And this is the fundamental absurdity of this whole idea. The profits of businesses are their savings. After paying their costs, it's the money they have left over from their revenues. After meeting all their obligations, all their contractual dollar amounts they have to pay to their workers, to the bank, it's the money they have left over. It's their savings. And by the state reducing its expenditure, or consumers spending less, consuming less, and saving more, increasing their savings rate, every single dollar that is supposedly $1 more available for businesses to borrow is $1 less those businesses are receiving as their own profits. The businesses give up $1 of their own savings that they could lend to someone else, that they have free of charge, don't have to pay back, don't have to pay any interest on. They give up that for access to $1 that they could borrow, that they have to pay back, that they have to pay interest on, and the only way they're going to be able to afford that interest is if they're making profits, all of which they just lost, dollar for dollar. No country needs another country's savings to invest. No business needs household savings to invest. That's not how the banking system works. Investment comes first, and the profits, the savings, are the result of that investment. Because someone had a good idea how to use resources more efficiently. That's what an innovation is. They increase their savings because they've reduced their costs. That's what an increase in efficiency is, what an innovation is. They've reduced the resources they need to have the same output. They've increased their profit margins, and those resources are now free for someone else to use. But as we've seen here, the savings don't come first. If the savings first had to be taken out of the income, out of consumer expenditure, the very incentive for businesses to invest would disappear. The only way an economy can grow is through the money creation that the banking system does. It's called credit. The reason why the United States has a trade deficit is simple. The US dollar is overvalued, or the currency of many of its major trading partners is undervalued. The prices of imports are often much cheaper than US domestic production. And because more is imported as it's exported, there has to be savings coming in from outside. That's just how the balance of accounts works. If that didn't happen, there just couldn't be more imports than exports. To buy more than you're selling, you go into debt. That's all the savings are. That's all the capital flows that are flowing to the United States are. They're just to fund its excess imports over its exports. They have nothing to do with businesses trying to invest. They have nothing to do with the US household savings.